Burlesque Stripped Down, episode number 47. Welcome back once again, my friends. This is Velvet Eau Claire, as always, your guide through all of the secrets. You know, all of them. The saucy secrets, there's some of those. There's some sexy secrets. And then there's often some not-so-sexy secrets, as it turns out, of us, the ladies, gents, and non-binary folk behind the tassels. So welcome. Thank you so much for pressing play today. This is actually a very special episode, and so I'm really glad to have you with me. I have a big ol' smile on my face because as of this last week, we did pass the 1-year birthday, anniversary, whatever you want to call it, of Burlesque Stripped Down. So I have been podcasting now for 1 whole year. And it's unbelievable to me that the year's gone by so fast. I can't believe it's already been a whole year. So I thought today, I just wanted to do kind of a special episode. We are, of course, smack dab in the middle, well, still beginning, I guess, middle of the season O Sex, which is going phenomenally. If you missed the last week's episode, we actually had a 2-for-1, kind of. They were released on the same day, but we had a recap of the time that I spent up at Sex Down South in Atlanta, which was a conference, sex and sexuality and sex education conference up in Atlanta earlier in October. And so I gave kind of a full, I think it was over an hour an episode. So it's a nice long episode getting into all the nitty gritty. So if you've ever wondered what it's like to go to a sexuality conference, if it's intimidating or it's interesting to you, definitely check that out because it was definitely very different than I expected it to be, but in a great way. I learned a lot, and it was very, very safe and a wonderful place. That same day, I also released my interview with Hannah Lee, who is an asexual burlesque performer. Actually, I should rephrase that. So she is a burlesque performer. She is a person. She's a human being who also performs burlesque and identifies as asexual. So that was a really interesting conversation because I think it's something that a lot of us who identify as allosexual don't really think about that kind of intersection and how that works for someone who doesn't necessarily feel the same kind of sexual attraction that some of us, or that I anyway, do feel. And so how that kind of works, because burlesque is such a sexual art form. So how does it work for someone who performs burlesque to also kind of have that different approach to sexuality? We'll put it that way. So if you missed that one, definitely check it out. Hannah was a great person to talk to. I think we could have talked on for a very long time, and I'm looking forward to sometime in the future when I start doing maybe some panel discussions and things, having her back on. But today, we're taking a little break from the season of sex, the season O Sex, to just kind of give a little happy birthday to this podcast. This isn't lauding me for my work. This is lauding just the podcast. And those of you that have been listening, whether you've been with us since the very beginning or if you're a new listener, thank you so much for listening. We've grown a lot. I've gotten some great feedback, and I'm really thankful for the last year of being able to create this and put it out into the world, even if it hasn't been quite as consistent as I initially had intended. I appreciate you all sticking with me through the hiatuses and all of that good stuff. So today, without further ado, let's go ahead and jump in. What I have today are 9 different lessons that I've learned over the last year, as well as 6 goals for my next year. So let's go ahead and jump right in. Now, the last year, majority in 2016, with the very end of 2015. So I'm recording this in just the beginning of November of 2016. So I'm thinking the last calendar year. I have had a lot of both personal and professional changes over the last year. If you stuck with me, you know that when I started this, I was kind of in Florida, but I was living in Paris and all of that. And I've transitioned back to being in Florida full time now. I've gone through several different jobs that have kind of not worked out or worked out. I've had some personal changes in my life and my relationships. And that's not even to mention all of the worldwide and nationwide political and social climate. I mean, it looks so different than it did last Halloween time. You've got things like, of course, here in Orlando, Pulse, Paris, Brussels, Brexit, Trump, Rio, the games in Rio, Standing Rock, the loss of David Bowie, the loss of Prince, the loss of Alan Rickman, the loss of so many other great artists, the Zika virus. And that's just really the depressing stuff, right? Although I guess Rio wasn't entirely depressing, but that was a lot of the depressing stuff, right? They also discovered gravitational waves. I know. I heard it. I listened to Star Trek with Neil deGrasse Tyson. It's just a great podcast you should check out. So apparently they discovered gravitation. If you didn't hear about this, it's pretty amazing. They knew they existed, but they hadn't like actually officially discovered it or proved it or anything, that their existence. So really, really fascinating stuff. So a lot of good stuff happened as well. A lot of not so good stuff. The next week here in the States with the election coming up, might change some things as well. But we just have, when I think back to Halloween last year, I feel almost like a different person. I turned 30 over the last year. And I feel like this has been a big, big year for me personally. And again, the worldwide as well. But it doesn't seem to be just me. I've talked with a lot of people, and it seems to be kind of a big shakeup year. Not just people my age, because of course there is the return of Saturn and all of that kind of stuff, whether you buy into astrology or not. But also just 2016 has just been kind of interesting. It started off, at least for me, it started off pretty rough. That was my first big hiatus that I took for several months at the beginning of the year as I was dealing with some depression issues, probably some personal changes, different things like that. I've gotten back on track, but you have good days and bad days. But enough about all that. What I want to focus on is the podcast itself and the community and the lessons that I've learned from 1 year of podcasting. So, of course, I say I'm going to narrow down and talk about the podcast, but really this first one is very, very broad and has to do with kind of my life and my approach to life in general. And that is that there is no should in this house. Whatever house I'm in, there's no should there. I am basically trying to eliminate the word should from my vocabulary entirely. I think it's a horrible word. If you've listened to the podcast, I have definitely mentioned this before. And basically with every passing day, I feel more and more sure that this is a word that has very little purpose. Perhaps sometimes, and we can get into a whole grammar discussion there, but has very little purpose in our language, right? Whether it's burlesque, podcasting, or pretty much anything else that's legal, fuck the rules. Fuck the guidelines, right? You can listen to them, use them if they work for you, but don't feel confined by them. Again, this is for legal things. Don't break the rules. Don't go to jail, okay? But for other things, we're told so often that this is the way you should do things. You should do this. You should do that. And fuck that. Go with what feels right to you. Again, I'm not saying you shouldn't listen to advice. You shouldn't try things. Learn from other people's mistakes. But you do you. I got to do me. So you do you, right? I've mentioned this so many times on the show, but guilt is a really tough beast that I grapple with. I don't know why, and I only have realized this over probably the last year or so. I end up feeling guilty about everything, right? From my frequent lack of motivation to my less than stellar eating habits to, the fact that I sometimes have to back out on plans that I've made with people, to just about everything. I end up feeling so guilty because I feel this sense of what I should be doing. So this really started to affect me when I was living in France, and I was, of course, learning French, and I found out that there's actually no direct translation for the word should in French, right? They don't have that particular modal, as it's called. And it kind of baffled me. I was like, wait, how do you not have that word? Like, how on earth do you manage to express the things that you're supposed to do, but you often don't want to, right? That's usually what happens with the word should. So how do you do that? Like, how do you express those things? For those of you that are grammar nerds, if you're like really wondering, what they use is basically the conditional form of their verb devoir, which means to have to. So it's kind of like a conditional have to, which makes sense. That's kind of what should is, but it's just used a little differently. You can email me if you want more of an in-depth grammar discussion. I don't really want to necessarily bore everyone with my grammar nerdiness, but I just thought that was such a fascinating thing. And the more I listened to A in French and B in English, I listened to these conversations and I started hearing people use in French not using the word should and what they used instead. And sometimes, yes, it was this conditional form of to have to, but sometimes they would just use other more explanatory words like I could do that. I could, but I don't want to. I would feel better if I did do that, right? And things like that. And so I just started listening then in English and noticing where we say the word should, and we could replace it with something else that would be, again, almost more descriptive of the situation and less guilt-ridden. So anyway, this is a topic I'm actually kind of developing and might actually develop kind of a talk on as well, because I think this is really, really important. And so that's been probably one of my biggest, these are all 9 of these. That's why I put them on the list. They're all big takeaways. But this has been a huge thing. And I've really been just trying, not necessarily actively working to phase it out of my vocabulary, but just more noticing when it comes up and why it's coming up and why I'm using that word instead of something else. And just noticing and examining the guilt that's behind it. So if that resonates for you, definitely start thinking about those kind of things, thinking about the fact that, maybe there's no should. Maybe you could eliminate the word should from your vocabulary altogether. And I've heard this come up on other podcasts as well. So I know it's not just me thinking about this. My favorite, I think I first heard it on Jumpstart Your Joy with Paula Jenkins. And I think she said, you're shoulding all over yourself, which I just think is hilarious. A great way of putting it. So don't should all over yourself, friends. That's lesson number 1. Lesson number 2 does have to do specifically with podcasting. Here's the thing, guys. Podcasting, when it's done right and when it's done consistently, is way more work than you thought it would be. I can't emphasize this enough. And here's the thing is that people can tell you this till they're blue in the face right before you start a podcast. People told me twice weekly is what I started out with. And then, people are like, twice weekly, that's a lot for somebody who also needs to work and make money and do all of that. So people can tell you this, until, you're sick and tired of hearing it, but it won't really sink in until you have to do it week after week. It doesn't seem bad the first week or two because you're excited and you're into it. But this is every fucking week, guys. Every week. It never stops, right? And so kind of a sub point to this, like if you don't love it, don't do it. Okay. If you don't love it, don't do it. I will say I don't always love it when I'm actually recording, but I always feel great afterwards. And I feel great when I get the episodes up and I start to hear some of the feedback. So anyway, it's a lot of work, something like podcasting. Just keep in mind if you have ever thought about it. I definitely encourage it because it's a great thing, but it is a lot of work. So that's been a big lesson for me, is that it's way more work than I thought it would be. But as kind of leads me into this next one, I have also learned, lesson number 3, that I need to be kind to myself and that being vulnerable and kind is not a weakness. So the connection there between lesson number 2 about podcasting being way harder than you think is that, of course, if you listen, you know that I've actually changed my schedule a bit. First, I changed the schedule to be kinder to myself on which days they were released. And now I'm going back to I'm only committing to a minimum of once weekly for the podcast. But if I feel like throwing in another episode, I'm going to do it, right? So I'm just being kind with myself. I'm just going to stop holding myself to these really high standards that really it's just me creating for myself because it's what I should do. See how these all connect together? So being kind to myself, being vulnerable with myself, with you, with people in my life, and realizing that vulnerability is not a weakness. This has been huge for me. Those of you who have listened, again, you probably know I basically worship at the altar of Brené Brown. If you don't know Brené Brown, this woman, she's amazing. She is phenomenal. She blew up. I mean, she's been doing research for years. She's a researcher and kind of a sociology type researcher. And she blew up kind of on the greater scene, I guess, the social media and all of that, when she did 2 different TED Talks. The first was back in 2010 and then another, I think, in 2012 or 13. And her 2 TED Talks were about basically the idea of shame, the idea of vulnerability, and the part that it plays in our lives. And I tell you, it started with those, and then I started reading things from her and watching her videos and checking out her website. I took one of her online courses. I'm in the middle of one of her books, and I've bought like 3 more of them. I've already read a couple, and she has so many great insights as to how we approach ourselves, how we approach our shame, and how we approach our vulnerability. So I realized that over the years, I have always seen vulnerability as a huge weakness, and I don't like to be weak at all. That is not my favorite thing. And so I tend to, those of you who know me in person, especially those who know me well, you may know this about me. I tend to kind of blow up when I'm starting to feel vulnerable. When I'm starting to feel weak, I get angry and I lash out because that's my way of protecting myself. And so it's been, and I'm not there yet. It's been a slow process that I haven't finished. I haven't finished this. We never finish our journeys, do we? But I haven't fully accepted this fact. My head has. I realize that being vulnerable is not a weakness, but I haven't quite gotten there internally yet, but I'm getting better, and it's every day a little bit more. And keeping Brene Brown's words and thoughts and research and books and quotes and all of that in the top of my mind is really helpful with that. So that's lesson number 3, is that I can be kind to myself, and that being vulnerable and being kind and authentic, you all know I did Authenticity Month back in December. It's a big topic for me. None of those things make me weak. In fact, they might even make me stronger. So, lesson number 4. Lesson number 4 deals specifically with burlesque because, of course, I've been interviewing mostly burlesque performers and producers and cabaret and vaudeville and showgirls and all of that. And so one of the things that I've really realized that I love about burlesque, and granted, burlesque is amazing for a lot of different reasons that I've talked about here on the show, that we gush about when we all hang out together. We're like, oh my gosh, this is so great. It's so body positive and blah, blah, blah. Which it usually is. Not always, but it usually is. But one of the things I love the most about burlesque is the approachability of our big, quote, stars, right? We have these amazing, huge names in the industry, and they're so approachable. And I've heard this from a lot of people who, I will say me, unfortunately, I have been unlucky with my scheduling and my financials so far, and I have not been able to attend any of the really big festivals or conferences or things like that. So I haven't gotten a chance to meet in person too many big stars. But those that I have met, those that I've emailed, and I've heard this from a lot of you, that when you do meet them in person, some of these, the legends and the big stars of right now, they're so approachable and they're so friendly. Not everybody. Everybody's got their own personality. And sometimes even if we are normally approachable and friendly, we're having a bad day and we don't really feel like it and we don't necessarily react well. That happens. I get it. But on the whole, our industry, it's just such a kind and approachable atmosphere, I have found. Again, it's not going to be like that all the time, but that's one of the things I've just learned about burlesque through doing this, and I've really loved. I've gotten the chance, I've actually emailed several of the quite big stars in the industry, and while we haven't worked out scheduling yet, they're all super interested in coming on the show. We had Suki Singapora, who is a huge star in Singapore and even around the world, of course. And, she was more than willing to come on, and we worked out scheduling, and it was so, the fact that I email people and I don't necessarily get like an assistant or I get blown off or anything. So that was just a really pleasant surprise for me to learn about burlesque throughout this last year. Lesson number 5 is a personal one, but having to do with this podcast. I have learned that audio editing is not my thing. I'm not good at it. I had a feeling this was the case before I started the podcast, but I have really learned this, especially after going to Podcast Movement and meeting a whole bunch of people where audio editing is their thing. And they're talking about all these things that A, I don't understand, and B, I don't really care about. I don't really want to understand. Yes, I want this audio to sound as good as possible for my listeners. Absolutely. That is without a doubt the case. But I do not have the brain for thinking about just all the details of it. And I never really have. I've never had a great ear for different things. But for example, I'll sit here and I'll edit an episode. And I'll put on, some effect, like I'll change the equalization or something on a short clip. And I'll listen to it back and forth, like doing it and then undoing it and back and forth like that. And either I don't hear a difference or I don't know which sounds better. Even if I can hear a difference, I'm not like, I don't know which one is a good thing, right? I just don't. And maybe I just need more training and I am going to be taking some more classes. But I've also learned that we should play to our strengths, right? And my strength, especially at the moment, is not audio editing. So that is one thing that I'm actually hoping to bring on board at some point, is someone to do more of the audio editing, when either I can find someone who wants to do it as part of the team, part of the BSD posse, or if it's someone that I can afford to pay every week on a weekly basis to do these, to edit these. Because as I said, not only do I not know how, but I don't really feel that it's the best use of my time and my strengths to spend all my time learning how to do it well. So that's lesson number 5. Not my thing. Audio editing, not so good for me. Number 6, this was a huge takeaway I got from Podcast Movement 2016, which was up in Chicago. And I'm so excited for 2017 for the movement next year. It'll be in LA. So I'm really excited, actually, Anaheim specifically, but I'm super excited for that. But this was a big takeaway, and I don't remember who first said it. I can't imagine it's a new concept. I want to say that it was Pat Flynn that mentioned it, but I could be wrong. There were so many good presenters there. But basically, that their advice there was to think about your download numbers of your podcast in terms of real people in a room listening to me talk. Because it's easy for those of you who have a podcast or you can imagine this kind of a thing, or the same thing on like Facebook too, your followers or your people that comment or whatever, or that that see your post. It's easy to get discouraged with smaller numbers because my numbers on this podcast, they're not as high as a lot of the other podcasts that even ones that have been around the same amount of time as me. People just get more listens. I don't know. I'm working on, being more effective, but we also have a smaller niche audience, burlesque performers with, that's very specific. So it's easy to get kind of discouraged and be like, oh, I've only got a couple hundred people listening to this episode. But man, wait, hold up. A couple hundred. If I was in a room on a stage talking and there was a couple hundred people in that room listening to what I had to say every fucking week, that's amazing. And so that was a huge realization for me that it's not to be ashamed of. And it's just so much more meaningful when you think about it that way. Like you that are listening to me right now, thank you. Like it means a lot to me. Just because we don't have thousands of people doesn't matter. This is important. This connection right here. Yes, I'm speaking to you. I am speaking to you. This is what's important. And it's just amazing that you even a couple hundred people take the time to listen to what I have to say. Just me. I mean, I'm nobody. I'm just velvet. Whatevs. Although granted, I know you mostly tune in to listen to my guests, but still you get me as well. So that was a big thing. And that's what helps kind of keep me motivated week after week, even on my hiatuses. I'm still thinking about that. And even if I do end up growing, I'm still just very thankful. And I just find it so meaningful when I think about it in those terms. Lesson number 7, again, going a little bit larger scale here. Every single fucking human being feels the imposter syndrome. All right, maybe there's a few exceptions. I don't know about sociopaths or psychopaths or all those kind of things, or just people who are just really I don't even believe that. Even people that are really confident. I think of a couple people in my life that are just always super confident and just seem to have their shit together and know what they're doing. I don't buy it. I bet you anything that they feel the imposter syndrome as well. For those of you who were listening last December, I did do a whole episode on the imposter syndrome. It was episode number 8, and we talked all about what the imposter syndrome is and a little bit about like how to kind of deal with it and how to still get through your day feeling that imposter syndrome. And for me, the biggest step of facing my imposter syndrome is knowing that I'm not the only one who has it. Everybody has it. I mean, there's quotes from Mother Teresa. Right? There's quotes from Tom Hanks, Stephen Hawking, like all these amazing people who think to themselves sometimes, what the fuck am I doing here? Okay, maybe Mother Teresa doesn't say the F word, right? But like, who am I to be doing this? Everybody feels that way. So many people that I've talked to when it comes up on the podcast, they've told their own stories of feeling that way at any given time, right? We don't always feel it. Some days we have those great days where we feel like, yes, I'm exactly where I need to be. But often it creeps in, even in the midst of that. So it might be something, as you know, sometimes I change the questions that I ask my guests occasionally, just tweak them up a little bit. And I may start asking guests a little bit more about this because I think it's so important that we realize that we're not alone in this. Everyone feels the imposter syndrome. Everyone feels like they are somewhere that I don't want to say shouldn't be, right? Because we don't want to use the word should, but that they're kind of like it's that idea. It's like, who am I to be doing this, right? Why do people want to listen to me? What do I have to say? And so it's just a matter of getting past that. And, I think support really helps with that, finding out you're not alone and being able to talk to people about that. Lesson number 8. This was kind of a personal lesson, but I think it's applicable to a lot of people as well. For me, Purpose is more important than passion. This harkens back to, if we get in our time machine, go back a little bit to episode number 22, in which I talked, I was by myself, but I talked about this idea, the intersection of purpose and passion, or the difference, really, between the two. And it was inspired by an episode on Jumpstart Your Joy, which is another podcast with Paula Jenkins. She's the host. And she was interviewing another woman named Laura Sims. And Laura was talking about this idea of everybody says to go follow your passion, right? If you follow your passion, you'll never have to work a day in your life. Yay! That sounds phenomenal. You also might not get paid much, right? There's the problem. So finding your purpose is about finding where you can make such a big difference, use your passions, use your strengths, and have an impact on the world or on, the person down the street or on a couple people or on a group, and so finding that purpose. And I have just really realized that, yes, I have passions. I am what we call, multi-passionate person. I have so many different things that I love, but not all of them are going to be my purpose. They might just be a little passion that I have either as a hobby or just something I'm interested in, but they may not be my absolute purpose. So, for example, something like that I'm very good at, like if I look at my strengths, right? I'm a really good English teacher. I've taught a lot of English. It's not really my passion. I don't get up in the morning and live to go over the grammar tenses of the English language with people. But I'm very good at it and I do enjoy it. But it's not my passion. And I've also realized I don't think it's my purpose, at least not right now. And that's another important thing, right? Your purpose can change over time. It doesn't have to be one thing for your whole life. This is what you were put on this earth to do. It could be that, but it doesn't have to be that. You don't have to feel like you should do that or you should be there, right? So teaching English is something that right now is neither my passion nor my purpose. So even though it's a great career for me, even though I could be making a ton of money living in Japan right now, which I almost did when I first moved back from France, I almost went to Asia for a year or two. Something inside of me was like, no, that's not where you need to be right now. Then I look at acting. Acting is definitely a passion. I really, really enjoy it. I love being on stage. I love creating characters and telling these stories and all of that. I adore it. I really do. But there's something missing because I'm not quite willing to make the sacrifices that it would take to do that as a career. And I don't see myself impacting people the way I want to impact people with that as a career. Again, at least not right now. So for me, that checks the passion box, but not necessarily the purpose box. And so I've decided to put that, I'm still doing that as a hobby, but that is also on the back burner a little bit along with the English teaching. And so for me, I have actually discovered something in the last 2 months probably that I think could be a bit of my purpose at this point in time. And I'm not quite ready to kind of dive into that yet, but it has to do with things like burlesque. I'm still doing this podcast and I'm still performing burlesque because I do love it. But, there's something missing. There's some of that purpose missing still. And so I'm kind of working to hone in on that. So anyway, all of that to say that number 8, for me at least, purpose is more important than passion. That doesn't mean it's that way for everyone. For some people, they're perfectly happy being the starving artist who is pursuing their passion and doesn't give a shit if anybody ever hears it or what kind of impact that makes on the world. But for me, I need that kind of two-way communication, that external impact that I'm going to have. So that's number 8. And lesson number 9, very simple. I think we all learn this frequently throughout our life, is that time freaking flies, doesn't it? The older I get, and I know I'm still only 30, but I can't fucking believe how fast time flies. I was looking at some photos. Of course, there's, lovely Facebook gives you, your memories now every day. And I was looking on Facebook and I saw some pictures from 5 years ago from a Halloween party. And I had that moment where I was like, how is that 5 years ago already? And now I'm thinking back to my very first episode that I did. And when I was creating this, what is burlesque? And when I was promoting, make sure you subscribe because we're going to be launching a new podcast. Burlesque Stripped Down is coming in October. Yay. That was 365 plus days ago. I can't believe it. Time flies. And so, I know it's cliche, but I got to say it. We got to take advantage of every day. And that can sometimes be relaxing and watching Netflix. I'm not saying that we should, always push ourselves, to go all the time. But we have to really make every day count because it just starts going faster and faster. I remember back when I was in school, I think a lot of you probably identify with this, back in, elementary, middle, and even high school, a whole school year seemed like forever, right? And that's only freaking 9 months. And it just seemed to last forever. And now 9 months, that's nothing. That's nothing. That goes by so fast. So those are my 9 big lessons that I've learned over the last year. I'm sure there are more. There are probably some smaller ones. There might even be a big one that I'm forgetting. But when I sat down to really reflect on the last year of producing this podcast, those were really my 9 big takeaways. Of course, I've learned a lot of other things from my fabulous guests over the year as well, as far as my performance, as far as my production, as all of these things, not least with, of course, the first one that always pops into my head is the idea of putting glitter in my sunscreen, right? I think that was Holly Rebel that said that. It was a great idea. But those are the big 9 that have kind of impacted my life probably the most. Speaking of my guests, I do want to take this second to give a huge shout out, a big thank you to everyone who has come on the show over the last year. We've had Kirby Marzell, we've had the Saucy Pear Cabaret, we've had Polly Pony Girl, we've had Adele Wolf, we've had Violent May, we've had Ruby Jones, we've had 2 of the Distress Dolls, we've had Ariel Helvetica, we've had Kalita, we've had Sapphira, we've had Ava Valentina, Suki Singapora, Legs Malone. I say it every time like that. It's awesome. Diva Hollywood, Lola Frost, Professor Pinkerton, Leopard Lass, Red Hot Annie, Holly Rebel, Millie Dollar, Kyla Prince, and now we've also brought on Hannah Lee as well. So thank you to everyone, all of you. It's just, I've learned so much from you, and I feel so thankful to have made the connections with you. And for those of you that I have not met in person, I am super excited to someday meet you in person as well. This is a great time for me to mention too, if you are interested in being on the show or you know someone who would be a great guest, definitely email me or put me in touch with them. This is the season of sex, so I'm mostly focusing on kind of those type discussions right now, but I'm also always looking for more people. I can't always get to everybody right away, but I'm always looking for more people to interview. And now for some goals, because, as I mentioned in one of my episodes before, we need to set our smarter goals, right? Our SMART goals, the ones that really can help us hone in. So I came up with this list of goals. I have a lot of goals for the next year with all these different projects, but these are some 6 specific goals that I have for the podcast specifically for the next year. And I'm sharing them here to A, inspire you to set your own goals for the next year, and B, to help hold me a little bit accountable. Because as we've talked about a little bit, if we look at the 4 tendencies, which were created by Gretchen Rubin in her book Better Than Before, or they were at least identified by her, I do have a bit of rebel in me, and I also have a bit of an obliger in me. So once I have some external accountability, it helps me to follow through on things. So you are now my external accountability. And if you'd like to be more of an accountability buddy, I would love that. So you should definitely email me. So my first goal for Burlesque Stripped Down in the next year is to build a small, dedicated BSD, Burlesque Stripped Down posse. As a side note, I still haven't decided whether I want to call it a posse or a squad. So I need your advice. I kind of like my squad, like our squad, but I also kind of like posse. I don't really know. So I need your advice. Let me know which one I should do. Back to the main goal. Okay. So in case you missed the announcement a few weeks ago, I am building a team. I'm looking to bring on both teammates and ambassadors to help out with everything and with making Burlesque Stripped Down even bigger, because I have some really big dreams for it. I have some great ideas on things I want to do, but unfortunately, there are only so many hours in the day, especially when you got to work to pay the bills. And there's only so many skills I have. As I mentioned earlier, audio editing, not so much for me. So if I'm able to, I would love to bring on someone who is good at audio editing and who enjoys audio editing, who can help out with this engineering aspect. I'm also looking for people to help out with social media, which would be mostly ambassadors, right? Just ambassadors are just there to like share everything and to kind of build up people talking about it. And then I'm looking for team members to help me with making transcripts, doing the blog posts, scheduling the interviews, coming up, with big picture ideas, doing maybe some graphic design, kind of whatever people feel they can contribute. So that's one of my big goals for the year, is to build a small team of people who are really in the same mindset as me. They maybe listen to some similar podcasts, so they're kind of along the same, the same mindset, the same type of a person as I am. Not exactly the same, because that never works, but along those same lines, and who really are also committed to creating this worldwide, kind of stripping down of the burlesque industry, so that we have this really strong community throughout the world of people who are working towards the same goals, and creating this community of people to strip down burlesque and make it accessible. It's a little rambly, but so basically I'm looking to create a small team of people who are like-minded and willing to help me out with some of the work. And again, this is a team. This is not me and some minions. I'm not looking for minions. I'm looking for a team who can help me to build up this larger worldwide community, if that makes sense. If any of that resonates with you and you'd like to talk about helping out, you don't have to make a commitment. We're not I'm not holding you, I'm not making you sign any contracts or anything. Like, it's really, it's just a conversation. Head over to burlesquestrippeddown.com/join the posse. And you'll be taken to a little form that you can spend a couple minutes filling out, so that I know a little bit about you. And then we can start talking about it, because I just really would love to have a team on board. I do really well when I have other people to kind of like bounce ideas off of and everything. So that's goal number 1, is to build that small little posse/squad. And first of all, to decide on what the name's going to be. Goal number 2 is pretty simple. Goal number 2 is to continue publishing episodes with minimal hiatuses. I think it's hiatuses, right? Not hiati. No, that doesn't work. Hiatuses. English is weird, guys. English is weird. So, as you know, I've taken a few large hiatuses over the last year due to some personal things. And I am hoping to be able to continue publishing regular episodes. Hopefully going down to once weekly is going to make that easier for me, as well as this new discovery that I have. A little side note. Okay, we're going to come back to this goal in a second. I'm actually recording this for the very first time inside of a proper sound booth, like a real sound booth. It's at the Orlando Public Library, has this amazing place called the Melrose Center. And they offer, for county residents, they offer an audio recording studio, video recording studio, a lot of like technology stuff, these sound booths, editing suites, all of this for free. It's amazing. It was done by a donation, and this place is great. So I'm actually recording this from this audio booth. So back to my goal, with the discovery of this, it's going to make recording a lot easier, because part of the reason I don't get things recorded as often is because I'm stressing out because I don't have the studio set up at home. So I may still take hiatuses here and there. I'm hoping to be able to announce them prior instead of just kind of disappearing as I've been doing. And but yeah, that's goal number 2, is to kind of continue with a more regular publishing output and minimize those hiatuses as much as possible. Goal number 3 is very number focused. Goal number 3, I would like to break 10,000 listens by the end of 2016. So we're very close. I think right now we have about 7,500 listens, almost 8,000 listens, I believe. So a couple thousand more listens by the end of 2016. And then by next Halloween, a year from now, I'd like to break 30,000 listens, which is a big goal, but I think it's doable. That'll be about 2,000 per month, which I think we can do. I mean, it's going to take a lot of work. Don't get me wrong. It's definitely going to take a lot of work, but I think we can do it. And if you'd like to help out with that, again, simply by sharing these episodes with your friends, with your colleagues, with your troupe, with your guests, anybody like that, anybody who'd be interested, really, that was going to help me out immensely. And if you have not already subscribed, please do so that you get these new episodes as they come out directly into your podcatcher, whichever that may be. If you don't know how to do that, just email me. I will set you up. It's super easy. So those are my numerical goals as far as listens. They're fairly small. I mean, again, this is kind of when I compare myself to other podcasts, that's not all that much. But for me, I feel comfortable with those number goals, and I think that would bring us to a good spot. Number 4, this comes back to the approachability of burlesque stars. I want to bring on Dirty Martini, Juliette Lesmuse, Tigger, and Mr. Gorgeous in the next year. Those are 4 of my big name goals. And actually, the first 3 have already agreed to be on the show. It's just we haven't worked out scheduling. And then I haven't approached Mr. Gorgeous yet, but he's phenomenal. He is just gorgeous, isn't he? Wonderful. So those 4, I am really hoping to officially bring on the show. So you can definitely keep an ear and eye out for those episodes, because that is my big goal. Of course, don't get me wrong, there are many, many other people I want to bring on as well, and I will be bringing on, but those are kind of my 4 big names for the next year. Goal number 5 is to build a resource library and a thriving Facebook group for my Burlesque Stripped Down patrons. Again, if you missed the announcement, I have launched a Patreon page. So if you love the show and you want to support it and help to keep it free for everybody else, it always will be free to listen to this show. Don't get me wrong. But if you'd like to support me in creating the show, you can go to burlesquestrippeddown.com/support, and that'll take you to our Patreon page where you can donate per month. You can donate as little as $1 per month. That's totally fine. That will absolutely help. All the way up to, $25 if you'd like to do that much. You'd be my best friend forever. And what I'm going to be doing, I already have some perks there for people who do donate. We're going to have some Facebook groups, some private, talking with me, some private thank you video, things like that. But I'm also planning to build up a resource library of some things like worksheets and takeaways and checklists for some of the business stuff that that I kind of prefer to work on, like creating your website, like creating your brand, things like that. And so I'm working on creating some of these documents and worksheets and printables and everything. And so I'm going to be putting them together and making a library available to my patrons. Anybody who is supporting the show is going to get free access to this library. It may be only for patrons. It may be available for other people as well. I haven't really decided. And of course, also a thriving Facebook group. Once we get some patrons on board, a group of us, we're going to be creating that Facebook group, which is going to be a private place, a smaller place for us all to kind of discuss things. And I'll bring in some guests from past episodes as well. So that'll be, a nice place for us all to discuss things in a smaller, kind of more intimate environment. And number 6, I'm going to be encouraging more listener feedback, because I do receive some feedback on these episodes, and it is, generally very positive. I love hearing from you. I get voicemails occasionally. I get emails. I get some Facebook messages and things like that, and I love them when I get them, but I wish there was more. So if you have a second, please, even on Twitter, just send me a shout out. Send me a hello, how you doing? I just love it when that stuff happens. And so I'm going to start encouraging more of that and more of kind of interaction that way. I'm going to start doing maybe some contests and challenges and things like that, where you can send me some pictures and do all of those things. So I'm just going to work on creating more of, more activity surrounding Burlesque Stripped Down. So again, this is all a lot of this is going to tie back into that first goal as I start to build this posse squad. Should I call it the posse squad? I don't know. As I start to build up the team a little bit more, it'll free me up and it'll help us to think a little bit bigger about doing some of these other things. So there you have it. Happy birthday, Burlesque Stripped Down. Thank you again to all of you that have been listening over the last year. Thank you to the guests that have come on. Thank you to everybody who has supported and shared with your friends and given me feedback and all of it. I so appreciate it. I really, really do. Those were 9 of the biggest lessons that I've learned and 6 of my goals for the next year. I am really, really optimistic about keeping this going and about building it up and doing some amazing things. To those of you who are listening in the States, don't forget that on Tuesday, November 8th is Election Day. Super important. I will not tell you who to vote for, but I think you know how I feel about this election. So important to get out and vote. Every vote counts. If you're in Florida, please consider voting no on I don't know if it's amendment or proposition, whatever. Amendment 1 about the solar panels. Please do some research on that, because it is backed by the big power companies. So it's clearly not in the best interest of those of us who want to, continue on with things like solar power. It is not a good amendment. If you're in California, please, please, please do some research and strongly consider voting no on Prop 60. Prop 60 has direct ramifications for anyone who works in the sex industry, in the adult industry, particularly the porn industry. I'm going to be doing an entire episode on that. That's going to come out. I'm actually working on it right now, so it should be coming out around the same time as this episode. So if you have a chance, listen to episode number 48. You're going to hear some of the background on the proposition and why it's so bad for the industry, but not only for anyone who is in the industry, but for, as I put it in the interview, Joe California, right? Anybody who lives and appreciates freedom of our bodies and freedom of expression and all of these things, as I think most of us who are burlesque enthusiasts do. So please consider voting no on Prop 60 and definitely get out to vote in any case. In any case, wherever you are in the United States, please get out to vote. If you are in another country and you have elections coming up, also get out to vote. Very, very important that we use our powers as a democracy. So thank you again, everyone, for listening, for your support over the years. Definitely consider joining up in the Burlesque Stripped Down posse if you would like to contribute, if you feel that any of it resonated with you. If you're able to support our show on Patreon by going to burlesquestrippeddown.com/support. And if you're not able to, I totally understand. Definitely just share this with your friends, with your colleagues, with your team. And until next time, make sure that you stay sexy.